speed compression does and how that changes your ride and how you should set that up.
So we'll talk about rebound after. Rebound, I'd post up first. Low speed compression, we can maybe do rebound first.
Yeah.
So rebound so you've got your air spring on one side, and the air spring does this awesome job at absorbing force. It's great at absorbing it. It's really dumb at letting that go. Okay. So if you don't have a damper of some description, and at least from my experience with RockShox, even the cheaper forks have a really basic damper system, there'll be some control over the rebound. If you don't have rebound, you've got a pogo stick, okay, which is not going to be great for the goal of suspension, which is, well, it's good in the sense it's a shock absorber, but it's not keeping your wheel planted, which is the ultimate goal on a mountain bike. So there's two controls on the damper side if you've got them. There's rebound and there's compression. When you move into your stroke in your travel, if it's an air fork, it's doubling in pressure every inch or whatever it is, and you get a lot of pressure, and that thing's kicking back at you to try and, move back out to where it was before. Air particles they're all moving and they're vibrating and they get quite hot and they don't want to be together and they kind of want their space. They want to go back out to where they were. But there's a hydraulic control on that, which is your rebound. And that is literally like a damper is a column of oil. There's a shaft in the bottom. There's a piston head. The piston displaces oil, so it moves the oil around. And on the rebound side, when that spring's moving, you have adjustments that you can control how quickly that shaft moves down. So the damper will have more control of the spring wheel on that release, and that's what's allowing your wheel to move up and down. There's two different types of compression and rebound, and they're kind of the same thing. So low speed, I'll speak to RockShox because RockShox's my thing, and can't really say I know a lot about the innards of Fox stuff or other brands, but I do know how high speed works. But your low speed is the adjustment you have on RockShox. And your low speed is, it's literally, it's a hole or a little orifice in that damper tube. And that low speed hole can be adjusted with a pin. So if we think my pen here is that pin, the closer you move the pin in or out is the amount of fluid that can move in and out. So the more fluid, the faster the rebound, which would be say here. And then the more adjustment or the more rebound you're adding, the more that pin goes in and the less fluid can move out of there. Okay. Low speed adjustments are, at least for rebound, a semi shaft orientated. So it's more towards the end of the stroke when you're going back to full travel. And high speed's closer to the end because that's when there's the maximum amount of pressure on the spring. High speed is a little bit different. So you've got your hole here, which is that low speed orifice. Okay. And when there's a lot of pressure up here, that hole will fill up real quick, right? So normally when I was in Institute class, I'd have 7 people around a table and there was a door to the left. And I was like, if we were all to go out that door right now, what would happen? We'd all get jammed in the door. Okay. So there needs to be a little bypass for that. And that's where shims come into place. And they're little side doors, like those saloon doors in an old timely, American cowboy movie. And they spring open and the little spring. So once that hole is full, they can't get anything more through it because it's at, maximum capacity. There's these little washers, which I've actually got some out here because I tuned a shock the other day. But if you are watching, kind of look like this, and there's layers of them, okay? They're a little spring. And then when that overflow is required, they'll spring up. So there's a certain amount of force required to get those to open. That'll add in more fluid flow. So for rebound, it's usually when you're up towards your maximum travel or above half your travel. That's going to be your high speed rebound. And then kind of below that's your low speed rebound. It's pretty kind of set in the way rebound works. A lot of brands won't set your high speed rebound because you don't know you've set your rebound wrong on high speed until you're in the travel. And if that thing's set too quickly, you will get bucked and you will get hurt. And that's why RockShox have a really nice little system with their rapid recovery, which is like a delta kind of stack system, which is like a shim in a shim set up like this with a few other little doodads on the top that actually kind of make it a little bit quicker on the high speed. So I don't know if you guys will be able to see it. You need to watch this. There's a shim and a shim there.
Yeah.
And it actually is a little bit quicker on the high speed recovery, and then the low speed kind of can level that out a little bit, so you won't get bucked and you have a bit more control on the low speed. On the compression side, low speed, high speed are not shaft orientated though, which I can kind of explain. But does that make sense so far? Because I feel like I rambled a lot just then.
Yeah, no, it's good. Like,
okay, cool.
I think you're doing a great job.
So then compression's a bit different because there's not a bunch of spring tension on it. High speed, low speed, it's got the same mechanisms. So it's got an orifice, which is controlled via a pin. At least in what I've worked in, there's probably other systems out there, or a needle, as they call it. And then there's a shim stack as well. Now, low speed compressions generally are body weight and low speed movements on the bike. So usually the body weight of the rider moving around, it could be a little bit of brake dive. So you pull a bit of front brake, the fork goes to dive in, or likewise on the rear shock as well. It's digging in a little bit too much under those lower vibrational kind of movements. But then high speed are usually trail inputs. So it's you riding quickly and hitting a jump or hitting a stick or a log. They're not really shaft dependent for the most part. Okay, so you always need to go through a low speed compression to make it a high speed compression, but you could be at nearly close to full travel and get a high speed compression. Okay, because you're riding so quickly that the low speed orifice fills up super quick and then the shims need to move back. So they are kind of different adjustments, and they'll come down to what you're riding, how quickly you're riding, and the force really that's moving over the shock. If you're finding, a bit of front brake, you're diving too much, or, really chattery trails, you find the wheels maybe a little bit too reactive, but your rebound set fine, a bit of low speed compression is going to help control that. You're controlling the shaft movement of the spring. That spring's pretty volatile in its movement. It wants to move in and out as much as it can. And a bit of low speed compression can actually control that force a little bit. Likewise with high speed. So low speed's the pin moving up. If you do have a high speed control, it's putting, I've got a little shock. This isn't really the right part, but your shim stack, you have a little cup that sits over the top, and there'll be a spring that sits on the top of this, and it puts more preload on those springs. So it requires more force to get the movement moving. And that'll be for your harsher impact. So say at Medina, for instance, Mick, I had the same thing, going through some harsh impacts. I was finding my weight was going too far forward and I was getting kicked. I'd add a bit of high-speed compression on there, and that would allow a bit more control over those faster impacts for it to sit up a little bit. So kind of two different adjustments there that I think people get confused with. A lot of people think high-speed compression adjusts bottom out, and it really has nothing to do with bottom out. It may make it less harsh when you bottom out because you're controlling it a little bit more, but it doesn't actually control the bottom out. The damper has no idea where you are in the spring. They're two different things. One's a fluid-based system, one's a spring, and they do not talk to each other at all. Unless maybe there's some crazy stuff coming out in the future, but it's not travel dependent because they don't know. That's kind of my rant. I hope that makes sense.
No, it all makes sense. Just a random note: this meeting's going to end in 7 minutes and 54 seconds again. But when people say there's a progressive tune on their dampening circuit, how the fuck does that work? Because the oil is always...
Yeah, there are progressive and linear tunes. I haven't, to be honest, played in that space a lot, so I'm not well versed in it. I've heard some really good things about linear tunes. Because it's still a spring in the way it works, from what I understand, it takes a little bit less ramp up in that spring moving up for the linear tunes versus the progressive tunes. So to me, from what I've been told, it's a little bit more predictable damping, but I haven't played with it myself, so I don't really know how it would look like on a graph, but it kind of makes sense in my head because that spring, they are little washers and they would really start to ramp up in the way they want to kick back. So for me, at least from what the stacks look like, it looks like a bit of pressure off, but there are definitely people who know a lot more about that who would probably have a more accurate scientific answer as well. But yes, there are two different types of tunes, and it'll generally match the spring and match the bike as well.
So your setup kind of process is sag first, rebound second, compression third.
Yeah. And what we used to do on Stu was, so we'd have a whole bunch of death by PowerPoint on the first day with suspension, and then the third day we'd take everyone for a ride, and that's when a lot of light bulbs went off. So we had like a really short little test track, and I'd definitely, like anyone who's listening, I'd go do the same thing. Go find a short track that you can session and do like 10 or 12 times, it'll take a while. So don't go do a long track because you blow yourself out. You need to be consistent. So we do the first run, we just ride down as part of the loop. And then we're like, cool, that's a test track. Let's go do another run just so people get used to it one more time. Then we'd set their sag. So the way we had it on Stew is people set their bikes up however they wanted, which was however they wanted. And then I'd make everyone run 30% sag, do another run, come back up. Then we play with Rebound. So I'd go, let's go all the way open, do a run.
Yeah.
What was good? What was bad? Because there's positives and negatives to both. Like people get really, well, at the moment, open rebound is really trendy. But for years, closed rebound was trendy, right? So, you know, what's good and what's bad? What did you like? Some people would be like, oh, when it was fast, it was, you know, really poppy and playful. Cool. And then other people, like, when it's fast, it was pogo sticky and the wheel wasn't getting traction. So you're like, cool, there's positives and negatives. You go to all the way closed, all the way slow. Another run. Cool. What was bad? Well, I felt like the bike was dead. Yep. Okay. Makes sense. You're deep in your travel. It's not recovering. What was good? The cornering was sick. Bottom bracket was low. It was consistent. You know, same as what Mick's saying with dual silent. Like the bike was consistent and a little bit dead, but consistent. Like you can play with it. So, you know, from there, I'd kind of let people set. Like we were limited a little bit on time, but, you know, cool. Did you like it faster or slower? Cool. If you like it faster, go 1 to 3 clicks from the middle towards fast. If you liked it slower, go 1 to 3 clicks towards from the middle towards slow. And that's a really good way to set your bike up yourself. Like just go have a play. I think people go and buy these really expensive forks, all these clickers, and they never play with the clickers. Like go play with, they won't break. You know, you're not going to, it's not like the lockouts on the old Mazzocchi back in the day that would blow up. Yeah, like go do it. And then same with compression. Like, you know, if you've got high speed, low speed, or whatever you've got, like low speed's a really interesting one. Whereas I said, if you're riding really dusty, really brake bumpy, like that little chatter you get in a lot of Australia, and you're losing front end traction, like try and put on a bit more low speed compression. And I think you'll be amazed how much more traction you get, because the spring normally just wants to do this the whole time. And you're just controlling that spring a little bit. So it's not diving into the travel and out every time it hits the hole. It's just kind of going across the top, skimming across, and you get a bit more traction with that. And same with high speed, like just go all the way open, all the way closed, and see what you like. And from track to track, I'd implore you to change settings as well. Like it'll change because the pitch of the track will change, which is going to change your sag. So like I said, don't sit on the bike and get your measurement. If you go ride a track that's this steep normally, and then you go to Medina and it's this steep, you're going to need to change your setup a little bit. You know, I end up going down 10 PSI in pressure from like my enduro setup at home to my Medina setup, because I just wasn't getting my weight over the front wheel enough because the thing was so steep. So, you know, there's some pretty interesting things going back there. But yeah, set your sag, do your rebound, do your compression. If you can set those by playing with the range, I think you'll be in a lot better place than if you just go set them yourself. There's a lot of good apps online. Trailhead for RockShox is good for a baseline as well. But even just starting in the middle is a good place to start as well and work your way out if you need it. It's called bracketing. Like there's heaps of videos in there. I think Geordie does a really good one as well about it, but it's just playing those settings. And I think for riders, like the thing with suspension is like everyone's always looking for the perfect setup. There's no perfect setup. But if you can start to troubleshoot what you're feeling because you've played with different setups, you'll be all the more powerful for it. So, and then there's the whole thing of tokens as well, which is a different thing after you set your sag. Maybe we'll get into that at a different time if we're running out of time.